Well, welcome back to the Little Real Estate Podcast. I'm super excited to be here with a fellow Jake of mine, a friend and business partner, and so we should have a good conversation today. Jake and I spend a lot of time together. We play a lot of Golden Tee together for our Golden Tee fans out there. Maybe shouldn't be so proud of that one, but we do.
You've come a long way with that, though.
Come a long way. I actually am the leaderboard record holder on our local Golden Tee spot, so I'm kind of a big deal.
Had to work that in.
I did. Okay, Jake, so welcome to the podcast, and would love to just hear your quick intro, who you are, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, first, thanks for having me. So, Jake White. We've known each other a couple years now, I suppose, right? So, background, I was a police officer in Fort Worth for 22 years. I started in 2000, had a lot of cool assignments while I was there. It was a fun job. Started off like every cop does, work patrol. Did that for a few years in West Fort Worth. About 2004, I transferred to our undercover assignment where I was there for 10 years doing the whole drug thing. Investigating drug crimes. That was a lot of fun. We'll get into that in a little bit. Promoted, became a detective. That's a promotion in Fort Worth. Went to internal affairs where no cop or most cops aren't fans of that. But it was actually a really fun assignment. You got to see behind the curtain a little bit, but you can only do that for so long. So then I decided, I better promote again. So I promoted to sergeant. Went back to patrol for a short stint after being gone for about 15 years, and then went back to narcotics where I finished out my career as a sergeant. So,
did you spend your whole career with Fort Worth?
Entire career, yep.
Is that common?
Yeah, it's pretty common.
What was your favorite assignment that you had while you were with Fort Worth?
Sergeant in narcotics.
So why was that?
So you have a team, I had a team that ranged anywhere from 6 to 10 officers that I worked with. And so you get you're involved in all of their cases, right? When you're an investigator there, you help out your teammates, don't get me wrong, but you have your cases that you're working, right? So you're kind of laser focused on 1, 2, 3 cases. Whereas when you're a supervisor, you got to help out with all of them. And frankly, there wasn't as much paperwork either. So I'm not much of an office guy, right? As you know.
More of a Golden Tee guy.
Well, I'm terrible at that. I'm terrible at it. So, you got to, there was a lot of time, a lot of opportunity to where you got to go out in the field and do the fun stuff. So, yeah.
Do you have any particular stories that stick out in your mind from your time doing the narcotics things? I know I've heard some myself. Any that you can share?
It's hard. And I say this, it's hard on the spot. Because I did that for, in total, probably 15 years. There was literally a story per week almost, right? So it's hard to pick out one. You can go from like crazy to funny to, like these big drug busts, things like that. But it was all the time. That's the cool thing about that job is it was the most fun job you could possibly have. Right. It was a great time. So like isolating one, I'm sure one will perhaps come up as we talk. Yeah.
Well, that's one of my favorite things. We've known each other for a few years now. And to this day, you'll randomly just come up with a story about the time you guys stole a walrus from the zoo and sold it to a Nicaraguan drug lord. That may or may not be true, but that's usually how the stories seem to go. At least. So, and then some of them we'll just probably have to keep between.
Yeah, some of them we're just going to keep between us.
Between the ferns, maybe. So you did that for 20 plus years. How did it shape you to be who you are? What about being in that world?
So for me, the one thing it did was, plain and simple, I'm a people person, if you will, right? Kind of a generic description or whatever the case may be. But I think from in terms of shaping me, I talk to anyone. It doesn't bother me, to talk to a complete stranger, which I don't know that I would naturally be that way had I not had that experience.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about the stories you tell is the interactions that you get to have. You interact with some pretty heavy hitting criminals and interact with the general public now, and you're definitely a people person. So.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I talk about this all the time. And the one thing that that it taught me was how you view people, right? Like society has the ability to stigmatize those involved in criminal activity, right? And make no mistake, some of them are very, very bad people. Some of them are very violent, aren't contributing a whole lot to society. What I learned was maybe somebody's a dope dealer, and that's how they make their money. I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying it's okay. It's against the law in the state of Texas,
Sure.
right? And as law enforcement, you're there to enforce those law violations. But when you talk to them, you really do see there's not much difference, right? You have the same conversations, talking about whatever sports, telling whatever joke, right? I mean, conversationally, there's not that much difference. So it did, I think, looking back on it, that did shape the way I view, I think, people as a whole, right? I mean, I do have a recognition that, maybe somebody's doing something that violates the laws that, the legislator has written or has been codified, but the way they are as people, not a whole lot of difference. It's kind of wild.
Did you ever find yourself enjoying being with these people that you were there to? Did you build relationships with the people that you were enforcing the laws against?
So I think things were different back then, if you will, in the sense that where we were, I think the city's grown exponentially over the last 25 years, right? I mean, pretty close to doubled in size. Back then, I think that I'll just go ahead and say it, I think the police department was far better staffed than what they are now. So you had the opportunity to develop relationships in the community or communities where you worked. So you certainly got to know everyone in the community. I mean, for simplistically, the good and the bad, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that way now, right? I think it's changed. I think that the police department, by my best estimation, is seriously understaffed. The men and women, at least in Fort Worth, that serve this city, I think are drastically overworked because, like I said, I mean, numbers may say one thing, but reality says another.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that they have the opportunity to develop those relationships like we did.
Let's talk about your transition.
Yeah.
From police into real estate. So you were in the police force for a long time. At what point did you decide, hey, I think I'm going to dip my toes in the water and try real estate?
So it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago. For me, it always had a shelf life, right? I never wanted to exceed my expiration date, if you will, in terms of that job. It was a ton of fun. Obviously, most of my closest friends are still doing that job, but I knew that it wasn't going to be there forever, and I didn't want it to be there forever. And importantly, I didn't want that to be my only defining role, right? Because that's one of those jobs. I mean, think about it. You actually wear something that defines who you are. Like the masses, right? Private sector, if you will, you can walk into anywhere and nobody has a clue what they do unless they know you from this worldly famous podcast.
That's right.
Well,
I'm probably not a good example of that because everybody
knows who I am. So cocky. Just kidding. But with that job, I mean, you actually wear something that defines you. Right? It could be your uniform. It could just simply be your badge, your gun out. So it's easy to be defined as just that. To this day, I've been gone for almost 3 years. People still ask me cop questions literally every single day.
Hey, what do you mean by Okay, sorry.
Okay, so a couple nights ago, there were marked units, patrol cars going down Bryan Irvin. There was 7 of them. The light sirens, and they were. They were driving quickly. I got to keep this one clean. Sorry. So we were with some friends and they're like, hey, what do you think's going on? I was like, what do you mean? Well, there's 7 of them. I'm like, I don't know, probably something serious. It could be a murder, or it could be a really bad car wreck, or it could be anything in between, right? So it could literally be 1 million things that could be going on. I have no clue. right? You get that all the time.
Yeah.
But then also you do get some things where you can help out, right? I mean, if somebody calls and they don't know, like, do I call the police and report this? Do I not call the police and report this? So you kind of help out in that way. But it is funny getting those questions. So yeah.
So even today, you're still known as like Jake White, the Fort Worth police guy.
The longer you're gone, that goes away.
Yeah.
Like with the friends that I've had, like my longtime friends, yes. But it's weird now, and you see it where we meet these Fort Worth officers that were hired on long after I was gone, and I've only been gone almost, like I said, almost 3 years. So, you kind of transition away from it.
How have you used your identity as Jake White, the Fort Worth police officer, in real estate? Have you tried to tie those two things together, or have you wanted to keep them separate and kind of rebrand yourself as just Jake White, the real estate guy?
Yeah, you have to redefine who you are, right? And I think in real estate, well, I suppose in any industry, you need to that you are serving people in. You've got to be known as proficient. You've got to be the expert in it, right? That's why it's important to redefine yourself, right? And I've talked to a lot of, at the end of the day, you look at something like police work and people are leaving much like I did. They don't even make it to the finish line. They're finding other opportunities. They're doing different things. And so in terms of redefining yourself, you need to redefine yourself into what you are, what you're trying to become. Because like I said, you have to be to effectively serve people, I think you have to be the expert, right?
For sure.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's important without a doubt. So
yeah, so you leave the force and you go into real estate full time, and you're recreating, who you're going to be and what you're going to do with your career. What were some of the things that have come out of that?
Well, I thought that, in that transition period that, like from a client base, it would be more broad than what it is. Not saying that that's, it wasn't a hope or desire or goal to change my client base, but I just thought, well, naturally, it's going to be just other people besides cops. But as time went on, what I realized is you get in where you fit in, right? And that as a whole is, the people, the group that I'm closest with, if you will. So I, as I started looking at it, well, why not focus on that? Why not, other industries serve unique occupations, if you will, or specific occupations, I should say. Why not do that? So I think what that in kind of looking at that, at a high level, meeting you, we were able to kind of start going down a specific path. And so obviously now we have our, the Heroes Home Award that we started 2.5 years ago that was a little more broad-based. I mean, or is more broad-based in terms of first responders, teachers, nurses. But I think the biggest thing was when we really, really honed in on the police officers, and then, obviously the opportunity to partner with CLEAT, the Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas. I think that was a huge opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the Heroes Home Award and the CLEAT Home Award and all of those things. But I think you said something that really stuck out to me. You get in where you fit in. I think most people in fear in real estate and in really any business development role have a fear of missing out on opportunity, and so they want to cast as broad of a net as possible. And I think there's something to be said for taking more of a rifle approach versus a shotgun approach when building your business. So Fort Worth has how many officers?
I would estimate 1,700 to 1,800.
So there's 1,700 officers in Fort Worth, and statistically people interact in real estate one way or the other. Every 7 years, that means 15% or so are going to transact in real estate this year. So that's 200 real estate transactions within just the Fort Worth Police Department a year. And so thinking about that, I don't know anybody who would sit in your chair and think, nah, I'm good. 200 a year is not worth focusing on. And so I think it's cool that we've built a business that's focused on a specific community of people, and it's been a lot of fun. So what is the Heroes Home Award?
So that's a program, obviously, that we created that's specific to, like I said, the first responder market and your teachers and nurses. I think simply put, the overall goal is to allow those markets to become homeowners. In doing that, one of our main goals is obviously reducing their closing costs. Like we always, I have the same conversation all the time. My goal is to get your closing cost to zero. Can't promise you that, can't guarantee you that, but that's my goal. As 2 years with that has gone on, I think we've come up with a formula to where we've been able to accomplish that in the vast majority of the transactions that we've done, for sure.
So the Heroes Homeward gives money back to people. What are some of the numbers around that over the past 2.5 years?
Well, I think from an operational perspective, let's call it not even 2 years at this point, we've given back around $350,000 to our clients in terms of offsetting the closing costs when they're purchasing a house.
So that's a huge number. Obviously, $350,000 is a lot of money, and it's easy to just gloss over something like that. What's it like when you're sitting there across the table with a new Fort Worth officer who's buying their first house? And I know we've had some cases where people get a refund at closing. Talk a little bit about that personal side of it. What's it like to see those success stories and see those people achieve home ownership using the program?
That part's pretty cool in the sense that typically I think the vast majority of the people that we've served with this program have been first-time home buyers. So they come to us with misnomers of what they need to buy a house. Their expectations are typically a little bit skewed in terms of what home ownership looks like. I think our education classes will get into those, I'm sure, but seeing that from start to finish of what they think they need to buy a house versus what reality is, and then you hit that 30 days later, let's call it 60 days after the first conversation we've had with them, watching them go to the title company. And, honestly, even because we view, we don't always have control over what title company we're using, obviously. So you go to these title companies, and even the closers have the same reaction every time. They're going through the disclosure. They're like, oh, wow, you're getting a refund. We just had it happen a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool seeing that, and then explaining to, the first-time home buyer, or maybe not even somebody who had a different experience prior, watching them walk out of the title company with a check in hand. That's kind of cool because they're like, oh man, now I can go, I can put this in savings. I can go get, if I need to get new furniture, I need to get appliances, I got the money to do it. So that's kind of a cool experience.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite experiences. This is even something that I thought is cool is as we've done this program more and more, and people talk about it, people come to us and say, hey, I want what XYZ officer had.
Yeah, that is funny.
And so they kind of expect it. You're like, yep, here's your refund. And some of them were like, cool. Like they think it's normal.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, you don't know, man. Most people show up to buy a $300,000 house with a check for a $25,000 that they're giving to the title company, not walking away with it. So
it is kind of funny.
There's a lot of amazing programs, and we're able to do that through a lot of strong partnerships. So I want to switch from kind of the personal side of the business to the more business side of this. So talk about the partnerships that Heroes Homeward has and why that matters to you as a business owner.
So I think the first one would obviously with the Fort Worth Police Officers Association, the POA for short. I think that's probably one of our, without question, strongest partners. One, because, we're Fort Worth guys. We live here, families are here, et cetera. Them being local and having a presence in Fort Worth, I think that partnership has been absolutely phenomenal. The leadership team at the POA, I wish every member could see behind the scenes. And look, I'm one of those guys. When I was a cop, I was a POA naysayer. Because I had no idea what they did. All I knew is I was just a taker, though. I'm like, I'll take that raise. I'll take that benefit in the contract. I didn't contribute anything. I'll take that free meal. I didn't contribute anything.
That sounds about right.
Thanks. I appreciate
I've paid
that.
for his golden tea every time we've
No,
played.
I paid the first couple times, and you beat me there the last couple times.
Yeah.
So that partnership was phenomenal. If you remember that's where our office is.
Yeah.
Right?
I do remember that is where our office is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm giving you a hard time.
I know.
Go ahead.
I'm up there every day now.
Yeah.
Right? I'm an office guy in the sense that I have to have somewhere to go. I can't work from home, and I also I get distracted easily. We're both in that category, so do not just say, "Oh."
No, it's honestly amazing that we've had a conversation.
This is amazing,
long.
and I will give you that. So having that opportunity to office out of there and seeing the behind-the-scenes work that leadership team does is great. I feel guilty as a former member, I guess. A former member. I feel guilty from just like, I'm taking all the benefits and I'm not helping out at all. Those guys do, from Lloyd, Doyle, Robin, Novak, all those guys, they do a lot of work.
Yeah.
And they're really serving the members. And I think so. Partnership 1, definitely the POA. Partnership 2, obviously CLEAT. That's the new partnership with us, right? And we would not have gotten there without the POA. But CLEAT's a statewide agency with 27,000 members across the state of Texas.
It's huge.
Big organization.
Very big.
So that partnership also, I think, is significant for us because we can, kind of obviously what we did and what the goal was is let's call it a beta test in Fort Worth. I mean, it didn't take long to, kind of iron everything out, get some smooth processes in place. Once that was done, I think we both had the recognition of we can do this anywhere in the state of Texas.
Sure.
Right? I mean, and why would we not? So the partnership with CLEAT, like I said, I mean, as we're seeing, I think that if all works out by design and from what we've already seen, I think we're going to be able to help cops from Amarillo to Galveston with the real estate transactions.
I love when you tell that story because it reminds me of how we started this thing. And Jake and I had lunch one day and kind of had this idea like, hey, what if we just gave back to the local police officers? And then we had a meeting with a police department that's a little northeast of Fort Worth, and we drove out there and we met with these two guys, and it just was a kind of a flop. I mean, nothing really came of it. And when we were leaving this meeting, we were like, man, how crazy would that be if one day we were like partnered with Fort Worth Police Department? We laughed at that thought. It was like, oh, that's such a big opportunity. We'd that'd be crazy. And then 6 months later, we're moving in to the Fort Worth Police Officers Association building. So, and we've been there for almost 2 years now. So that's been super cool. And then to go from that to now we have started the CLEAT Home Award, which is the official CLEAT branded real estate solution for all CLEAT members across the state of Texas. So that's so cool. It's been cool to be a part of it and get to see it grow from an idea at Westside Cafe over a pancake to a statewide organization.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I think that the CLEAT thing, the other, kind of, we talked about the POA, and I think as we, pitched this idea to CLEAT, we got to also meet their leadership team. And it was the same thing. As a cop, I was just a CLEAT taker. Give me that legal protection. Give me this benefit. Give me that benefit. I was never involved. But then you meet those guys behind the scenes, and it's like, whoa, and these guys are doing a ton of work.
Yeah.
And make no mistake, the work that they do is brave in a different way. Not brave in the sense that they're putting their life on the line, right? Like the boots on the ground, the cops in the field are doing. But it's brave in the sense that they're confronting people for benefits, for improving benefits. I mean, they have to, they're sticking their neck out there. Whether it be the leaders of the POA, the leaders of CLEAT, that's not comfortable.
Yeah.
Right? It's not comfortable confronting a representative for the state of Texas or a city council member for the city of Fort Worth or whatever the case may be. It's not comfortable confronting them. But they do it, and they do it effectively, right? So I think when, from that partnership with Cleat, getting to meet their leadership team and seeing how hard they work, I think that was a cool, I obviously very honored that they let us do it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and our goal is to put forth the same effort that they put forth serving their members.
So what are the next steps for Cleat and Cleat Home Award? And maybe real quick clarify what Cleat Home Award is. And
Yeah. So Cleat is the labor organization. It's kind of an umbrella for the municipal and county law enforcement agencies as a labor organization, right? So the POA is the labor organization specific to the Fort Worth Police Department, but most of their benefits fall under that Cleat umbrella, right? So from a benefits perspective for the Cleat Home Award, obviously we've got the couple requirements of you got to be a Cleat member, right? Number one. Number two, you got to start your will. In the event that something happens, we got to know that that's getting done. It may not be able to get done in 30 days, but at least start that process.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point real quick about that. Yeah. We had these meetings with Cleat's leadership, and something they really cared about was, hey, if they're going to do this program, they need to have a will in place, which I thought was super interesting that they care, just shows that they care. They care about the cops, they care about the cops' families, and they know they're taking on a huge asset. A lot of times they're taking on a mortgage too. They want to make sure all that's squared away. I just thought that was interesting. So anyway.
Well, and along those lines, the reason being is, every day, not every day, but pretty darn close to it, we get, whether it's on LinkedIn, social media, where you see that Cleat update of a critical incident anywhere across the state. I mean, we had one here in Fort Worth yesterday where a Tarrant County Sheriff's deputy was shot by news reports 3 times, right? I mean, it's real. It happens. Tragically, sadly, it happens.
Yeah.
So making sure that that's something they don't have to worry about under the absolute worst case scenario, important.
Yeah.
So in terms of a benefit, like I said, Cleat member, start your will. Those are 2 things. But what are you going to get? So on average, we kind of separated our Cleat members from our Heroes Home Award members to see where we were at. And last year, and even into this year, on average, their savings has been approximately $14,000, right? So, I mean, we had one Monday where an officer purchased a house and his total out-of-pocket expense was like $930, right? So that's obviously the goal, and we want cops across the entire state to have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So
that's what the Cleat Home Award does. What's the vision for the Cleat Home Award? Where's it going?
Well, again, I mean, being the preferred real estate solution for Cleat members is where it's going is to serve cops across the entire state of Texas. We hear these stories every day on a local level. Let's use the apartment comparison that we've had. We've had this multiple times where, one of the things in police work, and this has changed significantly, is we'd call it an apartment security gig. And it's where you're a cop, you live in an apartment. Back in my day, I did it, but you got free rent, right? So, and in exchange for the free rent, all you had to do was deal with, my neighbor's playing loud music at 3:00 in the morning. So this was back in the day when we had pagers. So your pager would go off and you'd wake up.
Can you explain for a younger audience what a pager is?
Yeah, it was. It's so fun. Yeah, that is funny to think about that.
Back in my day,
I think
I used to be the security officer.
Oh, it's so bad, man. It's so bad. So anyway, but you would take care of these menial tasks in exchange for free rent. Well, that's kind of gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
Right. So now I think the last guy that we helped that had his apartment gig was he was getting $800 a month off of his rent. And for that $800, he had to lock the pool every night. He had to do these nightly patrols. I mean, several times when we were out looking for a house for him to buy, his phone is going off. Like, hey, my neighbor's playing their music too loud. Somebody's parked in my parking space. Like crazy. Like, I'm like, how are you doing this, man? Like somebody's parked in, that's not a police issue.
Yeah.
Right? And so I sat down and I'm like, well, let's assume that he puts 6 hours a week into this and they're paying him $800. That's what they were doing. So 24 hours of work in a month and he's getting paid $800. It was like $32 an hour, whatever the number was. Well, that same officer can go work a off-duty job or work overtime. And I'm not promoting the idea of work more in terms of the amount of hours. But the reality is, on average, most of those off-duty jobs are paying anywhere from $55 to $65 an hour. Or if you're working overtime, you're still probably somewhere in the ballpark of, I don't know, and younger officers probably somewhere in the ballpark of $55 an hour. So it just made absolutely no sense. So we want to take some of those misnomers of home ownership and educate the CLEAT members on buying a house and make that something that's doable. Like I said, whether they're in the panhandle or they're on the coast, right?
Yeah.
That's what we want to do. That's where I see it going.
So I think it's without question that being a police officer has become a more stressful job than it has been in the past, with, at least in Fort Worth, with what you're talking about with the understaffing issues and just the political climate in general. What does it mean to own a home as a police officer versus having an apartment security gig that you're talking about?
Yeah. So let's use that same the same guy that we're talking about that we just helped out on Monday.
Yep.
And this is not a far-fetched scenario. So as I mentioned yesterday, there was a Tarrant County Sheriff's deputy that was shot, serving an arrest warrant or a search warrant. I don't know what it was. It was in the city of Fort Worth, so Fort Worth PD had to come. The SWAT team showed up. But let's assume, because we always try to, obviously with our client base, we've got to be very cautious of, we don't want to reveal too much, in terms of their personal life. So let's just assume that the guy that we helped out on Monday buy a house, the one that paid $930 out of pocket, the same one who was getting paid $32 an hour by his apartment complex, the same one who was answering the phone because somebody else was parked in their parking space. Let's assume that he was on scene of that shooting. And that also, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that was what they call a critical police incident, in the sense that I believe that the suspect was also shot by police. So let's assume you're a police officer, you're on that scene, you were involved in that shooting, or you were there, right? I mean, because I'm going to tell you, like, one thing that sucks is, if you're on like a high stress scene like that, seeing your buddy shot or seeing them shoot somebody kind of sucks, right? Because it's like, whoa, this is, it's terrible, for a lack of a better description.
Yeah.
So let's assume that he was there.
Can't even imagine. Yeah.
And he's now at work for another 14 hours, going through interviews, debriefing the event, etc. And then he goes home. He gets home at, I don't know, midnight. And he's like, kind of a crazy day today. I'm a little bit tired. I just want to go to sleep. And then all of a sudden, his phone rings and says, hey, somebody's parked in my parking space. Can you come handle this? Or, hey, my neighbor's playing their music too loud. Can you go tell them to turn it down? That's the last thing they want to do.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I think the thing with home ownership is it's your castle.
Yep.
Right. It's your space. It's your comfort zone, and not every day is like that. Thank God most days are not like that.
Yeah.
But when they are there, it is nice to have somewhere to go to where you're like, all right, I don't have to deal with anything. I don't have to think about anything. I'm going to calm down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really important aspect of what we do is it is such a stressful job. Whether, what you're talking about is probably on the highest end, but even the day-to-day, that thought lives in the back of your mind, I would imagine. There are people out there who don't support what you do and would be violent towards you. And I know just from your stories, there's some sort of physical altercation once
Often.
a month. Yeah, I mean, it happens all
there's-
the time.
Yeah.
The last thing you'd want to do is come to that. What about the financial aspect? Do you think that there's anything to be said for the financial component of homeownership?
Yeah, 100%. Because again, I mean, whether it be they're renting an apartment or renting a house, I mean, let's apply a $2,000 a month rent, right? You're paying someone else $24,000 in a calendar year that you are never going to see again, right? Do that 2 years. You've paid somebody $48,000. Do it 3 years. I don't even know what the math. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It's so on.
I can't even count that high.
I can't even go that high.
I'm an Aggie. So you said 24,000 and I was like, is that higher than 10 or less than 10? I don't know.
So from a financial perspective, instead of giving your landlord $48,000 over a 2-year period, why would you not put that back into your own house? Because then that's one of the other things from the education components that we talk about. You have the numbers, and I don't have them memorized. The swing.
The financial swing. Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's a great point. I mean, over 5 years, if you're paying $2,000 a month in rent, it ends up being like 24 times 5 is what? $120,000 is what it is. So $120,000 paid out in rent over 5 years. Now, on the other side of the coin, if you do the math between houses appreciating 6% every year and you're paying your mortgage balance down every year across those same 5 years, the difference between negative 120 and I think it's somewhere around positive 160 or so ends up being a financial swing, is what we call it, of $280,000. People always talk about the wealth gap in the United States. And just by, if you took two people, let's say we take two Fort Worth police officers, one does an apartment security gig for 5 years, and one buys a house and makes his payments on time for 5 years. And that's the only difference between those two people. One of them will be $280,000 richer after 5 years, statistically.
Right.
That's going to happen.
Right.
And so it's just really important that people know that. And people often have a short-term perspective on these things and think, well, my apartment is $2,000 a month versus my mortgage payment would be $2,500 a month, and I don't want to pay the $500 a month. And we don't want to pressure people into doing that either.
No.
Don't get me wrong, but if you can do it, you should. And even we talk to people all the time, like, man, if you do have to work an extra 2 hours a week on a part-time gig to come up with a difference for your mortgage payment, if you can just do it for 2 to 5 years, and then you sold your house and said, I'm done, I'm going back to my apartment security gig, you'll have $200,000.
Right.
That's
significant
by doing just about nothing. So
Right.
it's the power of real estate. It's the difference in the wealth gap is those who own and don't. And even statistically, when Americans get to retirement age, 73% of their total net worth is in their home equity. So people will have a 401k. For police officers, it's a 457, and what are all the other? I don't know, 450
pension.
The pension, all that stuff. But if you just keep making your mortgage payments, you'll have
Right.
an enormous amount of wealth that way. So, okay, last thing I want to talk about before we jump out of here, talk about the education component. What does the Heroes Home Award do and now the Cleat Home Award do for that?
So I think that was early on something that we saw value in just because of the number of calls that we would get and the conversations we were having, creating that homebuyer education program, the first time homebuyer 101, whatever, homebuying 101, whatever you want to call it, right? For us, it's our first time homebuyer class is kind of our biggest one. And so from that education component, again, it gives us the opportunity to teach, multiple people at a time the advantages of home ownership, right? And how the process works. We got some positive feedback from one of our clients yesterday, and it was how involved both of us were. Because that's the one thing that I don't want to get too far into how we're doing it, but how involved both of us were in the process, right? So that homebuyer education component that we have is the step-by-step guide that we use when we're helping someone buy and or sell a house.
Yeah.
So I think that that has some significant value to it because it does clear up a lot of misnomers.
What's the typical, like, I'm trying to paint a picture. A lot of people don't know what it's like to buy a house. So let's say somebody picks a random real estate agent in some random bank to do their home loan. What do you think that experience is like compared to using a tailored niche program like the Cleat Home Board?
So I don't know, I don't know what it's like in the sense of what other people are getting. What I do know is what ours is like. And I think ours is, communication is paramount, right? That's with anything.
Sure.
But being there, because think about it whenever from start to finish, and especially once somebody is under contract, how often we're talking to them. We get on those group calls with them.
Yeah.
Like, like this is about what your monthly payment's going to look like. If we do this, then your monthly payment's going to look like that. It's constant communication. I think more than anything, it seems like it's constant education.
Yep.
Right? Like explaining, like constantly telling them, okay, so let's think 5 years down the road, right? I mean, because that's one of the conversations we have all the time with people.
Yeah.
Like, yes, maybe your mortgage payment is slightly higher than your rent payment. Maybe it's $200 or $300 a month higher. Well, you're not, more than likely, statistically speaking, you're probably going to sell this first-time home in about 5 years. So do you want to walk out of there with a check for $125,000, $150,000, or do you want to just keep giving your money to the land?
Yeah.
So there's that constant education component.
Yeah.
So I don't know if everyone does that the same way that we do.
Yeah, I think the word I would use is strategy.
Strategy?
Not a lot of people. I think most people shop for homes the same way they shop for puppies. They go see one, like, oh, this one's really cute, and then they run out and buy it and don't really put much thought into it. And we always try to take kind of hey, let's really think about this. There's a lot of different ways you can structure a real estate offer. There's a lot of different ways you can structure a mortgage. You can prioritize keeping your out-of-pocket cost to a minimum or getting a refund, or you can minimize your monthly payment. You can do a little bit of both. I mean, there's so many ways to do it, and I think that's one of the things I've been proud of what we do is helping people slow down and say, hey, I know the puppy's cute and all, but let's get a leash.
Pump the brakes a little bit on this.
Dog bowl, yeah.
Well, and it's funny you brought that up because I think the one thing that we may do differently is our focus is not, taking somebody to the financial end of their budget.
Sure.
Right. For us, in fact, we probably do a better job of telling someone, can you afford a $400,000 house? You can. Is that the best move to make? In your case, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Let's dial that back to maybe 300,000.
Yeah.
Right. So from a sales perspective, unconventional, right? Like I think that, and I'm not saying that other, I'm certainly not saying other agents or LOs are driving values up by, hey, let's take you to the financial end. I'm not saying that they're doing that, but for us, we're very intentional to do the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
And because we've had plenty of conversations to where it's like, yeah, you can afford this, but you do that and then you go on a couple vacations. Now things are going to get a little bit tight.
Yes.
However, if we go down into this price point, maybe it's not your dream house, but let's not look at it like a dream house, right?
Because in 5 years you're going to have $200,000.
Yeah,
and it's not going to matter. So, that's a good point. Well, man, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I don't think it's been as fun as Golden Tee, but it has been a lot of fun nonetheless.
You've I think it's probably because of the age gap. It's a big age gap too.
Age gap.
I mean, I grew up playing.
That's what we're blaming it on. You grew up playing
Nintendo, like the old Nintendo. You probably grew up playing like a
Nintendo's a thing that they put in the museums, isn't it?
Yeah, probably.
Dude, I grew up playing. I was a Nintendo guy, Nintendo 64. You had the big disc and you'd shove it in the thing, and I played.
Here's what I'm getting at. Yes, your skills at Golden Tee. When we first.
Well, hold on. I actually would like to hear the rest of that sentence before we end the podcast.
What?
Your skills at Golden Tee.
I'm trying to get to it. Your
amazing
skills at Golden Tee we started off, I think, on a relatively level playing field, and so quickly, I got demoted to like single A, and then you went ahead and got promoted to the MLB.
I appreciate you saying that.
I mean,
that means
I'll
a
own
lot.
it. I'll own it.
Thank you guys for joining.
Thanks.